Three spine-chilling, true hide-and-seek stories that expose the sinister dangers lurking in the shadows. Lila stood in her dimly lit kitchen, the stench of grease stuck in the air like a specter haunting her. A nagging voice in the back of her mind urged her to drop the dishes and sit down, just for a minute. But she couldn't. The weight of tomorrow's rent loomed larger than the half-baked lasagna cooling on the counter. As her teenage son Marcus shuffled in from the living room, his face displayed the boredom that life in their struggling suburb had birthed. "Mom, can we play hide-and-seek?" he asked, his eyes glimmering with an innocent hope that Lila wished she could mirror. Yet fatigue clouded her response. Still, a sense of nostalgia tugged her heart, a desperate attempt to capture the remnants of joy that echoed through her memories. "All right, just this once," she said, forcing a smile. Half-hearted, she called out a countdown, her voice fading into the night. Darkness wrapped around them, a heavy blanket stifling joy in the chilly Ohio air. When Marcus bounded off to hide in the rusty shed, Lila watched his figure disappear, her heart sinking a little. Shadows morphed as the wind whispered secrets to the night. To ease the growing dread of the neighborhood that once felt like home, Lila began to count. 10, 9, 8. But as she reached 3, she heard muffled voices curling through the air from the shadows. Two familiar figures, neighbors she'd known for years, lingered close. Their laughter twisted the air, the sound cutting into her chest. "You really think they're watching?" one sneered. "Better watch where you tread. You never know what might be lurking." Chills danced along Lila's spine. She dismissed the unease, sinking back into the game she'd initiated, but the laughter lingered in her mind, like a poison. Meanwhile, Marcus, tucked away in the shed, stumbled upon more than just a hiding spot. Eavesdropping on those twisted words sent a shiver down his spine. They talked about things that, for a child, made the night as terrifying as a scene from a horror movie. "They'll come for their young, you know," one sneered, and Marcus's heart raced at what that could mean. Just then, a cold breeze swept through the open window, raising the hair on his neck. The phantoms of fear wrapped tightly around him, leaving him paranoid, convinced that someone was watching from just beyond the shadows. As he left the shed, every creak of the old wood sent his pulse racing. Did he really hear those men laughing? Or was it all in his imagination? Whispers of two neighbors morphed into a horror story he hadn't wanted to believe. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Lila, entranced in her thoughts, barely registered the unease seeping into Marcus's voice when he returned home. "Mom, something's not right." She brushed him off, trapped in a moment of false security. But as night deepened, the signs that the neighborhood was shifting began to surface. Items in their home had inexplicably moved. An eerie feeling of being stalked settled over Marcus like an unwelcome fog. That night, as a storm thrashed outside, he barricaded himself in his room, a rookie survivor in this horrifying game. The shadows in the corners twisted and churned, whispering dreadful secrets, and each crack of thunder felt like the omen of an impending nightmare. Just as he steeled himself to venture out, his phone buzzed. His mother's frantic voice crackled through. "Marcus, it's not just a game anymore. I heard him, the man from the center. He's come for me." In that moment, as cold fear pooled in the depths of his gut, Marcus understood that the game had become very real. The monster they played against wore a friendly face, lurking dangerously close, hiding in the shadows of the neighborhood he once believed was safe. And as Lila raced into the stormy night to save her son, shadows whispered secrets of horrors yet to come. Rain pounded against the roof like angry fists, drowning out Lila's frantic heartbeat. She stumbled through her front yard, the world around her lost to the tempest. Wind howled, twisting tree branches like skeletal fingers, beckoning her deeper into darkened corners of familiarity she once cherished. "Marcus," she called, voice swallowed by the storm. Panic danced in her chest. She could almost see the shadowed forms of her neighbors creeping closer. What had that man said? The haunting laughter echoed again, making dread coil around her throat. The realization slammed into her. There was more to her neighborhood than the smiling faces had led on. Each step echoed in the abyss, sending hollow reverberations through her skull. Out of the corner of her eye, movement flickered among the trees lining their backyard, a suggestion of presence lurking just out of sight. Her breath quickened, terror eroding every rational thought. Who was out there? What did they want? "Mom!" Marcus's voice, strained and pleading, seeped through the rain. Relief washed over her, and she bolted toward the sound. She found him huddled by the back door, eyes wide, fear etching his features. "We have to hide," he gasped, voice trembling as he glanced over his shoulder. She followed his gaze, but saw only the ominous shadows dancing between the trees. "Where?" Panic rose, clawing at her throat. "Inside," he urged, tugging her urgently as lightning illuminated their home like a camera flash, turning it momentarily into a ghostly frame. They slipped through the threshold, barricading the door behind them with her old dining table, heartbeats sinking in rhythm to the storm raging outside. But the sound that followed was not thunder. It was laughter, deep, guttural laughter that resonated from somewhere down the street, hauntingly familiar. Marcus trembled beside her. "They're still out there, Mom," his voice barely above a whisper. "They said they'd come for us." Chilled to her core, Lila abandoned her maternal instinct to calm him, instead clutching him tightly, needing his presence as much as he needed hers. "Hush now," she breathed, forcing a sense of reassurance into her voice. "We'll just wait it out." But deep inside, dread twisted painfully, knowing they weren't safe just because they were indoors. As the storm raged, they listened, hearts pounding as the laughter melded into the wind, then quieted, replaced by something even more sinister, a low, rasping sound like nails scratching against wood. Someone was trying to get in. Lila's mind raced, memories of stories told by parents. The fables of children taken in the night came back like flashing images. "What do they want?" she murmured, trying to keep her mind focused and calm while the walls seemed to close in. "Mom," Marcus's eyes glimmered with terrified understanding. "What if they're looking for us like a game? Then we'll just have to win," she muttered, scrambling for something, anything, useful. She found a heavy kitchen knife, gripping it tightly as if it were a lifeline. Silence washed over the house, thick and suffocating. Then a voice, familiar yet twisted, spoke from outside. One of the neighbors. "Playing games late at night? We will find you, don't worry. Everyone's playing." Each word dripped with malice, echoing in the depths of their safe haven, spiders of fear weaving webs in their minds. Lila's heart raced, primal instincts of survival kicking in. "We need to get out of here," she hissed, adrenaline coursing through her veins. But just as they moved toward the door, a loud crash erupted from the living room, splintering the silence like glass shattering. The laughter returned, louder, closer. "You can't hide forever. The hunt has just begun." Fingers trembling, Lila looked around, searching for an escape. They couldn't just wait. It was time to switch the game. The night outside shrieked with thunder, but Lila couldn't tell if it was the storm or the monstrous laughter beckoning them. With resolve hardening inside her, she lowered the knife and whispered fiercely, "We will survive this." A fleeting thought pierced her mind, fueling both her dread and determination. What if the real monsters weren't just outside? What if they were already within? The door shook violently, and the dark whispers became frantic. "Let the hunt begin." And as the darkness seeped through the cracks, closing in on them, uncertainty clawed at her heart. How would they escape the very game they had unwittingly played? What if the hunters had already been chosen? The table rocked as something slammed against the door again. Lila's heart skipped, each thud sending shock waves of terror through her. This wasn't just a game anymore. It was a desperate fight for survival. "Marcus, stay close," she urged, gripping the knife tightly. Every shadow in the pale flicker of lightning created shapes that twisted and writhed, feeding her growing panic. Whispers flitted through the gaps, hushed voices taunting and sneering. The storm mingled with grotesque laughter, drowning out her thoughts. "What do they want?" Marcus murmured, eyes wide like saucers, reflecting pure fear. It was an agonizing question, one she didn't have an answer for. Just then the door burst open, splintering the wood as the dining table crashed aside like a matchstick. Lila's scream caught in her throat. The rain poured in, cold as ice, and a shape loomed in the doorway, a figure draped in shadows, its face hidden beneath a hood. Lila's breath quickened. It felt like a nightmare made real. "Found you," the figure rasped, voice dripping with derision. Lila's instinct kicked in. She grabbed Marcus and bolted for the kitchen, heart hammering relentlessly. As they stumbled over the threshold, the figure followed, laughter echoing around them, mingling with the cacophony of the storm. They dashed through the house, the shadows closing in, claustrophobic and thick. In the kitchen, Lila spotted the back door, and the storm raging beyond. "We need to reach the car," she shouted, urgency fueling her. "We can make it." But then, a blinding flash of lightning illuminated another figure on the porch, then another. The familiar silhouettes of her neighbors surrounded the house, faces twisted into grotesque masks of delight. "You're never alone in this game, Lila," one of them called out, laughter trailing off like smoke in the air. Panic surged. "This can't be happening!" Lila gasped, clutching Marcus tighter as they backed towards the remaining escape. The knife trembled in her hands, its metal glinting with the chaotic dance of the storm. The first figure emerged behind them, stalking with a slow, deliberate pace. Lila grimaced, recognizing him. A childhood friend turned into something unrecognizable. "Why did you leave our game, Lila? It's more fun when everyone plays," he said, voice sugary sweet, and entirely wrong. "No more games," Lila shouted back, swinging the knife instinctively. But it was a futile attempt. It shimmered in the darkness without force. Would the hunters feel pain? Did anything matter? Desperation surged through her veins. As they dashed for the door, Marcus tripped, falling hard against the tile. "Mom, help!" he cried, and every instinct screamed for her to turn back. Time slowed. Fleeting moments of clarity pierced through the chaos. Lila hesitated. To turn back would mean to sacrifice herself for her son. And maybe, just maybe, that was how the game was meant to be played. "Run, Marcus," she screamed, choking on fear. "Get to the car. I'll hold them back." But the storm drowned out her resolve, the wind howling in her ears like a banshee's wail. As she lunged backward, doubt flooded her mind. Could she really protect him, or was it time to choose who would survive this twisted game? With the storm as her soundtrack and terror as her guide, she cast one last glance at her son, before she found herself face to face with the real horror of this night. The figure leaned closer, grinning malevolently. "You're already one of us, Lila." Every hair on her body stood on end as the shadows around her morphed into something even darker. The laughter became a wild chorus, drowning out her screams as she stood at the threshold of losing everything. What if the true game had just begun? As the darkness enveloped her, she felt the cold fingers of despair tighten around her heart. Would she be able to find Marcus again, or was she now trapped in a game that stretched far beyond her understanding? Lila's world collapsed into an abyss of sound and shadow. She pushed back against the encroaching darkness, her breath ragged and shallow, panic clawing at her throat. The laughter, the terrible, mocking laughter, seemed to weave into an almost tangible web around her, sharp claws reaching for her mind. "Marcus, where are you?" The name escaped her lips, but the words felt hollow, swallowed by the storm that roared outside. Each second was a lifetime, and fear shackled her body, leaving her frozen in place. "Don't worry, Lila," the figure whispered, voice dripping with malice. "We're here to help you play." She jerked away, adrenaline flooding her veins. The knife felt heavy now, an anchor rather than a weapon. Was she really going to fight? The shadows twisted, elongating as if they were breathing, growing eager at the prospect of her dread. Suddenly a flash of lighting lit her surroundings, just enough for her to see. Just beneath the hood of her childhood friend, the familiar contours of a face distorted by an unnatural grin. It was a smile that betrayed the innocence of their past, warped and twisted into something cruel and grotesque. "Remember this place?" he crooned, gesturing with gnarled fingers toward the darkened living room filled with familiar furniture, a ghostly remnant of their shared childhood. It felt suffocating, heavy with memories and painted in fear. "No, I won't play," Lila choked, backing away. "You're not him." But with each step she took, the shadows danced, and the voices crescendoed, seizing her courage. Desperate, Lila lunged toward the kitchen, praying the back door still held. She burst through and was met by torrential rain lashing at her face. In that moment a flicker of hope ignited, but it dimmed almost instantly. The car sat like a distant ghost, the storm wrapping its icy fingers around it. "Mom!" A voice, distant yet familiar. A lifeline. Marcus's voice cut through the downpour and her heart swelled, then plummeted again as frantic whispers echoed all around her. They were close, circling like vultures over a carcass. "Over here," Lila waved, her eyes darting frantically. She strained to see through the sheets of rain, but every few feet felt like stepping into a void. Lightning struck again, illuminating the space in blinding luminescence, and she caught sight of Marcus, huddled beneath a flickering porch light. Relief washed over her momentarily, but dread quickly reasserted itself when she noticed the figures casting shadows behind him. Too many shadows, too close. "No, no," panic surged. "Get inside, get inside!" Marcus hesitated, confusion etched on his young face. Instinct honed from fear gripped Lila as she sprinted back toward him, ready to shield him from whatever was about to descend upon them. "Mom!" he squeaked, eyes wide, terror and trust colliding in his gaze. The laughter crescendoed, drowning out the thunder. Lila dove to grasp Marcus's arm, but another flash of lightning illuminated the masked faces of their neighbors. It was an entire mob, jubilant and savagely eager. "Join us, Lila! Join the fun!" A chorus sang from the throng, voices overlapping, a discordant symphony devilishly cheerful. Lila felt the ground shift beneath her, not just with the chaos of the storm, but with the heavy weight of realization. These weren't just neighbors. They were the predators, and she and Marcus were the only prey left. "Let's end this, Lila," urged her friend, stepping closer, the shadows behind him closing in. "You belong here." The storm screamed louder as she turned, heart pounding, forcing Marcus to keep running. But with each stride, their surroundings began to shift, a different layer of darkness, an entanglement of memories and escape routes. Just when it seemed they would break through, the very earth beneath them twisted. It felt as though they were spiraling into a void, consumed by its insatiable hunger. Lila's grip tightened on Marcus's hand. She couldn't let go. But the figures were relentless, their sinister laughter echoing behind her. "You can't escape, Lila. You can't escape our game." They reached the edge of the porch, but something cold slithered around her ankle, tightening like a noose. She looked down in horror. Shadows intertwined, pulling her back into darkness just as they lunged for Marcus. In that heartbeat, terror morphed into raw instinct. Lila turned, screaming, "Remember, Marcus, you have to hide!" The shadows erupted in a frenzy, and she felt herself begin to break, to bend under the overwhelming pressure as the darkness pulled at their legs, different voices calling to her from memories lost. "Will you save him or yourself?" The distorted voice taunted, and the storm raged on, muscles tensed between desperate resolve and inevitable despair. As the shadows closed in, all Lila could do was scream into the howling storm, but her voice was swallowed, nearly lost. "I won't let them win." But in that instant, she felt the pull and panic of dual loyalties, tearing her apart. Could she really protect Marcus? And as the darkness around them tightened, Lila glared at the smiling figures that had once been friends, now twisted and hungry, experiencing the heartbreaking truth. She was not just fighting for survival. She was now trapped in a nightmare beyond imagination. What terrible price would she pay to escape? Lila felt the shadows pull with a suffocating force, wrapping tighter around her leg like barbed wire. Terror clawed up her throat, but she couldn't let Marcus see her fear. Not now. "Run!" she screamed, voice raw as thunder crashed above. He hesitated. No child should witness such nightmares. She wasn't just conjuring terror. She was building a fortress of survival around them. Yet panic flickered in his innocent eyes, pushing Lila to shove him behind her, where danger couldn't reach. "Trust me," she pleaded, knowing that trust was often the first victim in horror. Darkness swelled, gripped like a vice, each breath threatening to drown her. She could see their twisted faces emerge from shadows, neighbors turned into monsters, eyes gleaming with malevolence. "Survival is the game," chimed a chorus of familiar voices. "You're the only one who can join us." "What do you mean?" Lila thought frantically. She felt the whispers clawing at her sanity. The weight of choices crushed down, and within the fray of shimmering darkness, images of happy gatherings played like old memories. Smiling faces splattered with a sinister sheen. Once warm laughter, now chilling like an icy blade. "Wake up, Lila!" shouted Marcus, face contorted in fear. Something in his voice struck a chord of clarity. She couldn't let the dark twist between them. She had to protect her brother at any cost. The laughter blended with the wind, a sinister melody that played around them. Gritting her teeth, she summoned every ounce of courage. "We're leaving." She pulled Marcus close, her heart racing against the symphony of horrors awaiting them in the darkness. A sudden burst of wind broke through, momentarily scattering the shadows. Lila hurried across the porch, hurling to the side. The world beyond was barely visible, the rain pouring thick like a curtain separating safety from despair. "Your part of the game has only begun," they hissed, the chorus distorting into an eerie static that clawed at the mind. But just as she thought they would break free, a shadow broke loose from the group, lunging through the rain. It was fast, unnatural, an approach born of nightmares. Eyes wide and glimmering, it shrieked, feverish joy coiling in its voice. "Join us, Lila. No need to resist." Instinct drove her forward, away from the porch, intent on breaching the barrier of safety. As they ran, the rain soaked through her clothes, a brutal awakening in the face of horror. With frantic desperation, she knew they had to weave through the trees lining the yard. Perhaps they could lose the shadows in the maze of branches. "Keep up, Marcus," Lila urged, forcing the guilt down. He was a child. He could collapse under pressure, break beneath the fear. But every stride felt like wading through thick fog, shadows racing alongside them, taunting their escape. "Where to now?" Marcus whimpered, eyes darting everywhere, a hunted look on his face. "Just keep moving," she gasped, adrenaline igniting every nerve. Yet ahead loomed an old, gnarled tree that twisted like a menacing sculpture. For a second, she hesitated. "Over there, into the woods," she pointed, cutting through the dark emotions clouding her mind. It was her instinct telling her, urging her to dive into the embrace of the trees. With raw determination, Lila hurtled forward, pulling Marcus to follow. The woods were darker, whispered secrets curling around them, but she felt safer. Among the trees she could blend into the shadows, strange comfort against the familiar faces haunted by wickedness. But the laughter followed, fading into cruel whispers that echoed through the flurry of rain. "We know where you hide. The game will always find you. It always finds you." Falling branches echoed with every panic-fueled heartbeat. She could feel the dense air crackle. Shadows writhed as she clutched her brother's hand tighter. "Lila, His voice trembled, and that was it. She couldn't allow fear to conquer him too. She smirked against the fear, pure resolve igniting. Then she stopped. "What if we turned the game against them?" Lila said, her heart pounding heavily in her chest. "Just this once. What if we made them play instead?" The trees blurred around her. Shadows lunged, the laughter crescendoing into a maddening roar. Could she really outsmart them? Could she make them the prey? As thunder rumbled overhead and the dark figures surged forward, Lila felt a chilling wave of dread. The moment she took a stand against the shadows, would it seal their fate or free them from this nightmare? With resolve tightening, she faced the encroaching darkness. I'm not afraid of you, she declared, feeling both reckless and brave. But as more shadows emerged, a chilling thought latched onto her mind. Could bravado counter the sinister intent looming so close? And just as the shadows encircled them, Lila's heart raced for one last desperate gamble. Would her plan lead her to freedom or plunge them deeper into the abyss? As they prepared to push back, the laughter erupted one last time, whispering promises of despair in return for their souls. The next moment would decide everything, life or endless game. Could she pull it off? The answer lay just beyond the dark, waiting to unravel. The shadows seemed to breathe, thickening around Lila and Marcus as they stood their ground. Dark forms closed in, faces painted with mocking grins, showcasing the thrill of a hunter closing in on prey. Lila felt the chill seep into her bones, but she hissed between clenched teeth. "You'll regret this!" Whispers danced in the air, seeming to mock her courage. "We thrive on fear, Lila. You think mere words can shake us?" The chorus surged louder, cutting through the deafening rain. "Marcus, don't listen to them. Just keep your eyes on me," she shouted, heart pounding as her resolve faltered. The shadows wriggled like serpents, intent on squeezing the breath from her lungs. "What do we do?" Panic flickered again in Marcus's voice. His tiny hand squeezed hers, grounding her in the chaos. Lila took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing thoughts. "We create our own game." She remembered the stories, whispered in the light of day, of those who outsmarted their fears. She mustered every ounce of defiance in her voice. "I am not just a player. I am a force bigger than you." The shadows flinched momentarily, and Lila seized the moment. "Tell me what you want." Her words echoed through the towering trees, and for once, the chorus quieted, intrigued. "Your brother," one shadow snarled, its voice dripping with malice. "He holds the key to the game. You'll lose him and darkness will reign." "No, you can't have him," Lila shouted, pushing Marcus protectively behind her. Something primal surged within her, deeper than fear. A fierce will to protect, to reclaim control. The shadows roared with delight. "Let us play, little girl. We win. You lose." They stepped forward, cloaked in dread. But Lila could see them. She could see their weakness. "Then let's make it fair." A flash of inspiration ignited her heart, sparking the embers of rebellion. "How about a game of hide and seek? If you can find us, you win. If not, you release us." The laughter twisted eerily, but it held an edge of excitement. "Agreed," they shrieked, voices bubbling with glee. "You think you can hide from the dark?" "Count to 50, Lila ordered, adrenaline coursing through her veins like fire. "If you can't find us, you lose." They agreed, voices echoing into the storm. Lila grabbed Marcus, and without a second thought, they sprinted deeper into the woods. The trees seemed to part for them, guiding their desperate escape. "Lila, what if they find us?" Marcus gasped, his breath heavy with worry. "Then we fight," she said, resolve hardening her voice. "But we're not going to go down without a fight." As they barreled through the underbrush, branches snagged at their clothes, scratching their skin. Lila kept her eyes peeled, searching for a place to conceal themselves. A hollow tree, thick underbrush, anything to throw off their pursuers. Their frantic breaths filled the air, loud and panicked against the ominous silence that seemed to settle around them. "Over there," Lila shouted, pointing toward a dense thicket. They dove inside, pressing against the damp earth, hearts pounding like war drums. The sounds of the shadows erupted behind them, enraged at being outsmarted. "They're coming," Marcus whispered, his voice quaking. The laughter returned, closer now. "You think this will save you?" It taunted, the chill biting through the thicket. "You're only making it more fun." Lila hushed Marcus, praying the thicket would be their shield. The darkness swirled around them, slipping through the trees, sniffing and searching. The laughter rang out again, a dreadful echo, the kind that wormed deep into your bones. Suddenly the laughter stopped. The shadows, having passed, seemed too quiet, too still. Inexplicable dread curled around Lila's heart. "What are they doing?" Marcus's breath quickened, panic rising in his voice. "This isn't right, Lila." Before she could respond, a sharp crack reverberated from above. A weight fell on the thicket, branches cracking under pressure. Lila ducked, pulling Marcus down. A dark shadow lunged from the trees. It was a blur against the backdrop of the night. "Found you!" It cackled, twisting around them, the contours of the face shifting like smoke. "Run!" Lila screamed, bursting from their hiding spot just as shadows began to converge again. She could feel the oppressive weight of darkness at her heels, the cold breath of the predators eager to snare them once more. As they tore through the woods, Lila's mind spun with frantic calculations. Escape was still possible, but every second felt precious as the shadows howled in furious delight. "Which way?" Marcus cried. "Keep going, we can't stop." Her heart thundered as they sprinted toward salvation, but deep in the recesses of her mind, a chilling thought lingered. What if they weren't really seeking to find them? What if they wanted to trap them forever instead? With shadows lurking close, every heartbeat seemed like a countdown, every rustle in the dark a reminder of the malevolent game at play. Would they manage to escape this wicked hunt, or would they be forever ensnared in the darkness, forced to join its cruel chorus? With each frenzied step, the forest felt less like refuge and more like an inescapable cage, tightening around them as they raced against time and terror. A scream echoed through the night, a familiar voice lost in the wind. Would they reach safety before the shadows claimed yet another victim? Would Lila's gamble pay off, or would it lead to their doom? Hope fluttered weakly as they dashed forward, the abyss of the unknown waiting just beyond the trees. Branches cracked and the darkness surged, but Lila and Marcus didn't dare look back. Every instinct screamed at them to run faster, to escape the impending doom. The sounds of their pursuers crawled closer, the mangled laughter echoing like a macabre drumbeat in the night. "Lila!" Marcus shouted, panic spilling from his voice. "Where do we go? Where are we going?" "I don't know," she replied, a bitter taste of desperation coating her words. "We just have to keep moving." The underbrush tangled around them, the moist earth slipping beneath their feet. Lila could feel the pulsing shadows creeping behind, creeping in, coiling around them as they raced with the ferocity of wild animals. The world was a blur, a fusion of twisted trees and the suffocating grip of doubt. "We can't stop, we have to... She struggled to find the right words, her mind racing as fast as their fleeing legs. Suddenly a flash of white flickered in her periphery. Dilapidated stone ruins half obscured by a thick curtain of vines. With a burst of adrenaline, Lila yanked Marcus toward them, their breaths mingling in shock. "Over there!" she gasped, darting toward the ruins. They ducked inside the crumbling walls, the air thick with the scent of rot and mildew. A heavy silence wrapped around them, smothering their frantic words. Shadows writhed outside, ceaselessly searching. But it was the silence inside that made her heart race. "Do you think they saw us?" Marcus whispered, his voice trembling. I'm not sure," Lila stammered, heart racing too loud in her chest. The fleeting respite was almost unbearable. She pressed her back against the cold stone, willing it to absorb the fear prickling at her skin. Time slipped by as they waited, each passing moment stretching into eternity. The storm continued its sinister symphony outside, the wind howling with the urgency of their plight. But the encroaching darkness had seemed to lose interest. "Maybe we should move again," Marcus suggested, his voice barely above a murmur. "What if they don't come back here?" "No, stay quiet. We wait," Lila whispered fiercely, her eyes darting towards the entrance. "If they know we're here, they'll come back. We don't want to be found again." Another tense silence descended, but this time, it was pierced by a low growl that echoed from the shadows just beyond the ruins. Lila felt it in her bones, a deep rumbling that vibrated with malice. "What was that?" Marcus squeaked, trembling slightly. Lila's resolve faltered for a moment. I don't know. Her fingers dug into her palms, and for the briefest instant she lost her grip on courage. Then, like a bolt from the blue, the realization struck her. "They're hunting us, seeking something more than just a game." She chanced a quick glance outside. The shadows roamed like a pack of wolves, but one figure lingered close to the entrance. peering in with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through the dark. "Lila, what do we do?" Marcus whimpered, his voice laced with fear. "Just stay still," she advised, but the words felt hollow against the chaos outside. Suddenly, the shadowed form let out a chilling howl that sent a shockwave of dread down her spine. The laughter returned, cackling excitedly in the distance. "This is going to be so much fun. What will we find first?" Lila's heart raced again, and a single thought ignited in her mind. Not just a game. This wasn't just hide-and-seek. It was a predatory instinct, a hunger. As panic threatened to consume her again, she steadied herself, whispering urgently, "We need a plan. We can't hide here forever." She clutched Marcus's hand tighter, sensing the urgency that pulsed around them like a living thing. With no time to waste, she assessed their surroundings. Everything felt like a trap. But then she spotted an opening at the back of the ruins, a narrow passage that might lead them away from the hunters. "Marcus, we have to go through that way." She made a quick decision, nodding towards the exit. "It might lead us to safety." "Isn't that where they'll be?" Marcus asked, eyes wide with terror. "Maybe," Lila said, acknowledging the truth. "But we can't stay here. We have to take the risk." Feeling her legs tremble, she steeled herself, urging Marcus forward, desperately hoping the darkness wouldn't swallow them whole. They crawled into the unknown, shadows looming ominously at their backs. With each inch forward, Lila felt the heavy breath of dread upon her neck. An unbearable weight pulled them closer to the ground as they ventured into the narrowing passage, the air thick with uncertainty. Behind them, the shadows rallied, their laughter rising like a storm gathering strength. With every step, Lila wondered if they were finally escaping the clutches of the darkness, or if they were merely stepping deeper into its grasp. What awaited them at the end of that passage? Was it freedom, or a trap laid by their relentless pursuers? The passage narrowed further, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees, the cold stone scraping against Lila's palms. A sense of urgency churned inside her. Time was slipping away, and she could feel the oppressive darkness nudging closer, a whisper of dread tickling her spine with every moment. "Lila?" Marcus's voice trembled again, wavering like a candle flame. "Just keep going," she replied, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. Panic surged within her, and she felt the walls closing in. "We have to keep moving." Ahead, a faint light pierced the darkness, flickering uncertainly like a distant hope. The glow pulsated, and for a second Lila thought it was a mirage born of desperation. But as they crawled closer, the soft illumination grew brighter, casting dim shadows on the moss-covered stones. "Do you see that?" she whispered, a mix of hope and fear threading her voice. "Yeah," Marcus gasped. "But what if it's a trap?" "We have to find out," she replied, resolve hardening within her. There was no other choice. They reached the source, emerging into a small chamber carved out of the stone. The air was different here, cooler, fresher. Although the light was still dim, it illuminated the walls, revealing strange symbols etched deep into the surface. Lila squinted to decipher them. The markings twisted and turned, swirling into impossible shapes that seemed to wriggle when she looked too long. "Lila, look!" Marcus pointed to a narrow opening on the opposite side of the chamber. It led to another corridor. But before they could move, a tremor shuddered through the stone beneath them. "Did you feel that?" she whispered, the unmistakable rumble echoing ominously. "Yeah," Marcus nodded, eyes wide and fearful. "It feels like something's coming." The laughter spiraled back, cruel and vicious, echoing down the corridor. It made Lila's skin crawl, like icy fingers tracing down her arms. They weren't safe. They weren't free. Not yet. "Quick! We need to get out of here," she urged, pointing toward the new passage. Just as they turned, shadows materialized at the doorway, their forms shifting, undulating like smoke. Eyes glowed a spectral blue, filling the chamber with an unsettling radiance that sent a jolt of fear through her. "Lila!" Marcus cried, backing away. "What do they want? What do they want from us?" "I don't know. We can't panic." She turned toward the corridor, heart pounding loudly in her ears. Shadows twisted closer, and the laughter crescendoed, a cacophony that rattled her bones. Now! They sprinted for the other passage, squeezing through the narrow entry. The darkness chased behind them, wrapping around their feet as if trying to drag them back. The corridor sloped downward, and the air grew heavy. The laughter transformed into a chaotic symphony of whispers, each voice begging for attention, promising safety in exchange for surrender. Lila tightened her grip on Marcus's hand, feeling his pulse thrum against her palm. "Keep running, we can't stop now." But uncertainty nagged at her mind. Each step felt like a miscalculation, a mistake that might lead them right back into the grasp of their pursuers. Desperation drove them further, twisting through the dank, winding tunnel. Each shadow whispered sinister secrets, and every footfall felt like an invitation for the unseen to close in. Then came another tremor, a violent shudder that forced them to halt momentarily. "What is happening?" Marcus shouted, fear rampant in his voice. Lila's breath caught in her throat. "I don't know, but we have to keep going." A loud crack filled the air, stone against stone. The chamber behind them began to collapse, a cascade of shadows enveloping their past. "Lila, what do we do?" Suddenly the whispers morphed into frantic cries. They were not alone. Beyond the narrowing passage, where the light flickered in the distance, shapes emerged. Inhuman figures with hollowed eyes and gaping mouths twisted in grotesque delight. "Don't look," she screamed, pulling Marcus along as the walls crumbled faster behind them. "What if we can't outrun them?" Marcus gasped. The laughter grew louder and more frantic, blending with the grinding of stone, both predator and prey closing in on them. They stumbled forward, propelled by sheer instinct, bracing themselves for whatever lay ahead. But before they could turn the corner, Lila felt a cold breath sweep past, harsh and bitter. It stopped them dead in their tracks. And then she froze, her heart thundering. A figure stood at the end of the passageway, cloaked in darkness, but she could see its eyes glowing, a predatory gleam cutting through the shadows. "Welcome," it hissed, voice as sweet and taunting as an inviting nightmare. Before they could react, it took a step forward, and the cavern began to shake beneath their feet. What awaited them in this new chamber? Was it deliverance or the price of losing themselves to the dark? Lila's breath hitched. The figure loomed closer, its eyes piercing through the dimness like twin beacons of impending doom. She tightened her grip on Marcus's hand, her heart pounding like a war drum. The walls felt alive, pulsating with a malevolent energy, as if the very stone were conspiring against them. Don't move," she whispered, hope flickering between them like a candle in the wind. The darkness coiled tighter around their legs, as if reluctant to let them scurry away. "Welcome," the figure repeated, its voice slithering through the air, coiling around Lila's mind like a snake. "You've come so far, do you really wish to leave?" Panic clawed at her throat and she could feel the weight of the shadows creeping closer. "We don't want anything from you," she shouted back, defiance pushing through the fear. But deep down, dread gnawed at her gut, whispering that it had already marked them as prey. Lila tore her gaze from the figure and urged Marcus to take a step back. "We need to run now." But even as she turned, uncertainty gripped her. The passage had morphed into a labyrinth of darkness, one she couldn't recognize. The echoes of their frantic footsteps ricocheted among the stone walls, drowning out the sinister laughter that loomed in the corners of her mind. The trembling ground beneath them settled, but it brought no comfort. It felt like the calm before a storm. "What if we never find our way out?" Marcus mumbled, tears pooling in his eyes, his voice cracking like fragile glass. "Stay with me," Lila snapped, almost desperate. "We can't lose hope, there has to be a way." Her resolve began to waver. Was she leading them deeper into their doom? The ghostly figure hadn't taken its eyes off them, darkness swirling like vapors, tendrils reaching forward as if hungry for their fear. In a sudden rush, it lunged toward them, moving with blinding speed, its form becoming a menacing shadow draped in chaos. Lila stumbled backward, dragging Marcus with her as the corridor threatened to shift and twist, morphing into an unrecognizable nightmare. Then the whispers returned, this time louder, more insistent. "Join us, they chanted, a haunting melody that pulled at Lila's sanity, laced with despair and yearning. "No!" she screamed, clamping her hands over her ears, desperate to block out the cacophony. "We won't become like you." Marcus's breath quickened, matching the frantic rhythm of her heart. "Lila, what do they want?" "I don't know," she yelled, spinning around to face the figure again. "What do you want?" Her voice cracked, raw from the terror flooding through her veins. "Only to play," it hissed, a grotesque smile curling its lips, revealing rows of jagged teeth. "Just once." Suddenly the shadows surged forward, a tidal wave of darkness, swallowing the corridor around them. Lila felt the familiar cold grip of dread tightening around her throat. "Run!" Lila shouted as the figure lunged again, hands stretching toward them like skeletal claws. They sprinted down the corridor, breathless and terrified, the walls closing in once more. But then darkness enveloped them completely. The glow of light vanished, leaving them disoriented. They stumbled, lost in a void that felt like the belly of a beast. The whispers clawed at her thoughts, dragging her further down into a suffocating panic. "Lila!" Marcus cried, his voice swallowed by the overwhelming void. She could barely see him in the pitch blackness. "I'm here!" she shouted back, fear constricting her chest. When the dim light flickered back to life, she found herself alone in a different chamber, larger yet void of sound. There was no sign of Marcus. Was this another trap, a trick of the dark? All at once the sobs echoed around her like cruel laughter, twisting through the air as she felt the walls start to pulse again. "Marcus!" she screamed, panic surging within her, reaching out into the darkness as the shadows shifted around her. And from the depths of the dark, a chilling voice purred. "He chose to stay." Her heart thudded violently in her chest as a cold realization washed over her. What had happened to Marcus? She turned, stumbling towards the remaining entrance, desperate to escape whatever fate awaited her. But the passage had begun to shift again, as if it were breathing, alive and waiting. "Where are you?" Lila's voice trembled in the void, pooling with uncertainty. As the darkness thickened, closing in, she felt the weight of secrets whispering beneath her skin, promising salvation at a horrific price. With a deep breath, she took a step forward into the shadows, questioning the very essence of her survival. Would she be able to reclaim Marcus? Or would she become yet another lost soul in the labyrinth of terror? The darkness coiled thick around Lila as she stood in that vacuous chamber. A terrible silence pressed down. But deep within, she felt a flicker of determination ignite. "This ends now," she whispered to herself, shutting out the mocking shadows that danced at the periphery of her vision. "Where are you, Marcus?" Her voice echoed against the cold stone walls, an invocation against the eerie calm enveloping her. The weight of despair hung heavy in the air, but she couldn't give in. She wouldn't. "Old friends," the chilling voice crooned from the shadows, dripping with familiarity and malice. "They want to play too, Lila. Everyone wants a turn." With horrified clarity, she understood. They hadn't merely been targets in this bitter game. They had become part of it. "No," she shrieked, the word ripping from her throat like a lifeline cast into the void. "Marcus, I'm coming for you." Each syllable resonated with fierce love, and with every heartbeat, she willed herself to push deeper into the darkness. Yet the shadows coalesced, writhing and swirling, forming a tempest of agonizing laughter. It felt tangible, attacking her senses, seeping into her very bones. Cold and dread began to grip at her heart, but she forced her feet to move, heart hammering as she felt her way through the haze. "Choose clearly, child," the voice slithered through the dark, taunting her desperation. "You can't escape what's real." Suddenly flashes of memory stitched through her mind. The warmth of her former neighborhood, laughter shared with friends. What had once felt safe and innocent now crawled with dread. Could the very fabric of her mundane existence hold such darkness? The walls surged dangerously as if alive, responding to her fears. "Your choices define your fate, Lila," it purred with unfathomable glee. "Are you ready to play?" "Enough," she spat, emboldened by the determination to reclaim Marcus. "I will find him. You're nothing but a specter of fear, and fears can be conquered." She stumbled forward, navigating through the thickening shadows. A cold breeze brushed her face, bearing the scent of something familiar. Was it Marcus? Hope unfurled within her chest like a beacon through the dark. "Marcus," she called again, louder this time, voice echoing into the heavy silence, drowning the sinister whispers that tried to drown her. "Lila!" His voice, faint yet familiar, cut through the shroud of despair. She raced towards it, propelled by love, by desperation. With an anguished heart and trembling hands, she pushed through the swirling mists of shadows that attempted to ensnare her. "I'm coming." The path began to lighten, revealing a faint glimmer up ahead. It was a door, the one Marcus had to be behind. Summoning every ounce of strength, she charged forward and flung the door open. It creaked painfully, revealing a dimly lit space beyond. And there he stood, Marcus, trembling and wide-eyed, laced in shadows, surrounded by the looming figures, faces pulled tight into mocking smiles. "Mom!" he cried, his voice breaking like the storm outside. Lila stepped through, arms outstretched, desperation clawing up her throat. "Marcus, I'm here!" She rushed to him, enveloping him in a suffocating embrace, willing both of them to melt into one solid entity of warmth and safety. The figures lunged forward, rage spilling from their grinning faces. "It's too late, Lila," they screeched in unison, swirling around them like a tempest of malice. "You cannot escape. We always win." But Lila stood firm, clutching Marcus with fierce determination. "You don't know us," she shouted, her voice rising. "We are more than just players in your twisted game." The shadows hesitated, something rippling across their features as they encountered the raw power of that declaration. Was that fear she saw flicker in their glowing eyes? "Burn!" Lila screamed. Channeling every piece of love and hope within her, she focused and thrust out her arms, light spilling from her heart in air-cast rays that shot toward the darkness like fireworks. The shadows recoiled, dissipating like mist in the dawn, screeching in agony as they unraveled under the warmth. "No, you can't! Watch us!" she shouted defiantly, holding tight to Marcus. The warmth expanded, illuminating every corner of the chamber, banishing the malevolence like the morning sun piercing through a stormy sky. As light spilled out, a shattering cacophony erupted, the grip of shadow fractured, flaring and collapsing into horror. "Mom!" Marcus yelped, clutching tighter as the shadows began to spiral and howl. "Hold on," Lila commanded, fearless. Together they stepped forward into the light, shattering the darkness swift and fierce, escaping as brilliant illumination engulfed them, an unstoppable force propelling them forward. In an explosive burst, they tumbled through the door and into a world where the storm still raged. But they were together, alive, free, and untouched by the darkness that once sought to claim them. The howling winds and falling rain felt invigorating, like a cleansing embrace after a long nightmare. "I'm not letting you go again," Lila promised, wrapping Marcus into her embrace. She could still feel the weight of darkness lingering, but in that moment, shadows had lost their grasp on their reality. Hand in hand, they rushed toward the car, the distant memories of laughter and warmth flooding back, eclipsing the terror they had faced. They would make it out of this unscarred, like phoenixes rising from the ashes, ready to reclaim their lives. Lila felt validation burning brightly in her chest. "I won't let them play with us again," she vowed. But the echoes of shadows faintly whispered in the distance, creeping back into the edges of her mind. Together she and Marcus climbed into the car, the raindrops cascading against the windshield, each drop a reminder of their victory. But they both knew there were shadows that lingered in the corners of every neighborhood. With newfound strength, Lila turned the ignition, the rumble of the engine bringing forth hope into the tense silence. The haunting laughter would always remain a part of their story, but because of their courage, they would never be unknowingly chased again. "Where to now?" Marcus asked, the remnants of fear softening as he settled into his seat. "To a brighter day," Lila smiled back, gripping the wheel tightly. "A day where we'll be safe and free." They'd leave the taint of darkness behind, And as she drove into the cleansing rain, Lila embraced her heart's only desire, to live, to love, and take the shadows head-on when they dared to threaten again. Because together they possessed a light that would never dim. This isn't just the end, it's our new beginning. And she meant every word. Now, I need you to take action. If you enjoyed this thrilling conclusion, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now. It really helps the algorithm. Flood the comment section with your reactions and theories because I want to hear your thoughts. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Show your support because only true fans understand the importance of keeping the magic alive.